Welcome back to our Saturday panel. Lots of texts coming in. We will get to those over the next little while. We do have 4 inter-county managers who are all involved in the championship in studio with us. We have Turlough O'Brien, the Carlow manager, Wayne Kierans, the Louth manager, John Evans, the Wicklow manager, and Liam Kearns, the former Tipperary manager, are with us. So, we barely mentioned Dublin. A tier all to themselves. 14 of the last 15 Leinster titles, a 16-point win over Meath last weekend. They're on course and odds-on favourites to win an unprecedented 5th All-Ireland in a row. And a lot of questions over the last week about, as I think it was Kevin McMenamin said, this was cyclical, or whether this is here to stay and we're going to see Dublin winning 6, 7, 8 All-Irelands every decade over the next 50 years. You look at the bare statistics, Dublin at the moment have 40% of all the people in the population. There's expected to be an increase in the population of 750,000 over the next couple of decades, with 75% of that in and around the Dublin area. You look at the funding, which I think has been well publicised, 18 million in games development funding from 2007 to 2018. Cork, the next highest, on 1.4 million. Do any of you think Dublin have an unfair advantage?
The more than one.
80 million of them.
Well, the first thing you say is that they have a good team. Absolutely. They are good footballers, and by God are they carrying their colours in the right manner. For full marks there. Absolutely.
I think everyone can put that out there, because it does come across that there is this bad mouthing of this current team. Nobody can say that this isn't possibly the greatest team with some of the greatest players and a lot of very good men involved in this current team.
They're not just a good team, but they're the way they carry themselves, their character.
Absolutely.
They're brilliant people. They're so committed to it. Dublin GA people traditionally have been really, really great GA people, and we often talk about the GA being a rural organisation, but Dublin GA people are so committed to the association. It's incredible, and it's great to see them reaping the rewards of their efforts. They are a superb team, but there are other issues too.
Absolutely. I'd be in awe watching them over the last number of years of what they've produced in terms of their players, their athleticism, their management team. Everything about them is first class. So the real question is not to knock Dublin. The question is, how does everybody else improve? So that brings back the financial question. So, is there an unfair advantage in terms of why is one county getting more resources allocated to them than the other? So it's not about the Dublin football players or the Dublin management team, it's the structure overall. How can we improve the other teams? And it's the same going to the playing structures. The message, the outcome goal has to be, how do we get our teams to improve? And I think people lose sight in that. And that's the main question really. So financially, is there a situation that can be created that's going to help everybody else? And there has to be.
I know you say not to knock Dublin, but is it going to be possible to bring teams up to their level without knocking Dublin back, without withdrawing a substantial part of the funding and reallocating it? Because you look at the sponsorship deals that are in place, they're only going to increase because sponsors want to be associated with the successful brand, but also the population and the amount of members at Dublin clubs that the likes of AIG and Vodafone now have access to, that unless you pool resources or take right back in the development funding, you have to sort of force Dublin into coming closer to pack. Because are you going to be able to bring the pack closer to them?
Bring it back to grassroots first, Nathan. 9 years ago, I came up here to Dublin to do a coaching seminar. I was absolutely shocked to see that every single club had a GDA. I was below in Tipperary, and we had four. 3 of them were for hurling and 1 for football. And I mean, the proportionality of the professionalism that they had back then was producing it. And the reason I'm trying to say this is that Tipperary, we got in a few guys into Tipperary, and we meet the Costellos, the Mannions, the Jack McCaffreys, the Smalls in a minor final. But now I look at Dublin, and it has grown immensely that they now have 2 GDAs to each club. They have the number of
54 games promotion officers, 3 regional development officers, a hurling development officer, and a football development officer.
That's astounding. Don't be blaming the Dublin football team for this. This is the structures they've set up, but they have the money to do it. And I think if John Horn or if John Costello comes on and they want to throw a bucket of water over the fuel that they're not financially advanced, I think it's inflaming it. I think they're throwing petrol on it by denying it,
Let's hear from Jim Gavin, actually. So he was talking after the Leinster final victory against Meath last weekend. He was talking to our own Maura Trasson-Nicellig about the unseen work that goes on behind the scenes with Dublin.
I know you're not a man who'll take praise, and I know you always say you bat it off and you say it's the players and they're wonderful. And this Dublin team, they are wonderful. They've achieved great things, and you're probably hoping they'll achieve even more. But you must be quite tired now of just people throwing the stones and, saying, oh, it's all money. Money got you here. It's more than money, I'd imagine.
Well, I was up with the under 10, under 11s now, got the growing up. Under 11s yesterday, the last game of the season before the summer. My son plays with Ballyboe and St Enda's, and we were playing Coola, and we had 4 coaches. Tony was leading us out in the sideline, and Coola had another 4 on the sideline, and don't think any of us were getting paid, that's for sure. We're all there to see our kids. Beautiful summer days with what your memories are made of. Cracking game of football, drawing the end, and we're just fortunate in Dublin that we have some really smart people with their hands on the tiller who are, who have applied to Croke Park, got funding. We're in a fantastic stadium, and Croke Park is led by some remarkable people. They have the mortgage paid off in Croke Park, so if I was in another county, I'd be knocking on their door with a smart business plan to say, we want to use, well, a similar model that Dublin have. The clubs fund up 50% of funding for the coaches. Croke Park do help, but their monies are bridged by the sponsorship we get, which is, we've got a good team there in the county board, and by gate receipts, and that's. But on the boots on the ground, the teachers who were with these men when they were 10 in Croke Park or in the coming Munster games, the mums and dads, it's probably a bit of an insult to say that that the funding that they obviously didn't get, but that the coaches get in the clubs is what's met them, and what's met them is bloody hard work, and mums and dads and guardians that care for the guys, and so I get to see that the pride that guys have for representing their county, and long may that continue.
That's Jim Gavin talking after the Leinster final last week. I know a lot of people were annoyed about the way he talked about volunteers, as if Dublin have some sort of a monopoly in volunteerism. I don't think that's what he meant, but is the point there that actually the importance of volunteers, it's the organisation around the volunteers in Dublin, that every club, every county has parents of under 8s, under 9s, under 10s who'll get involved in their local club. The difference in Dublin is that they have these 54 games promotions officers, that they're influenced, that the coaches that are going in, the parents, they're learning the right things to pass it on, and there's this cycle of excellence because of the amount of people that they're able to employ.
I think every county has its fair share of volunteers and coaches, and they're no different in Dublin in that regard. Certainly the impact of the GDAs would be very important in the development of the game. It's not an impact on the current Dublin team, I would say, but on the overall growth of the game in Dublin, it is. And, really, if you look at something like a professional sport like the NFL in America, where you have positive discrimination in the draft, where the weakest team gets to pick up the best player in the draft, we need some kind of positive discrimination in the GA towards the lower ranked teams, that they would get some positive discrimination somewhere along the line.
In terms of funding?
Probably in funding, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or some imaginative way of looking at it, but it's very unusual, for the strongest to get the most support when it's not needed.
Well, as well as that, look, you have to look at it. Where the most population is, they're saying per capita, it's proportionality and it is fair. Hold on a minute. Down in Kerry or Cork or over in Clare, there's less population, so they have to put their hands into their pockets a lot deeper to support their team. In fact, it is less money they should be getting because they have bars, they have pitches, they have the numbers here. So to me, it doesn't make sense, because
so that's on Dublin saying that actually the clubs pay for 50% of the wages.
Exactly.
Of the development officers.
I mean, you go down to Dr. Crokes and the Gooch is there, Pat O'Shea is there, Johnny Buckley is there. You go over to Lone Rangers and Peter Crowley is there. You go to Stacks and Donny is there. So this thing, there's volunteerism all over the place. However, we're not getting the financial end of it, and don't anybody kid yourself.
What Jim Gavin said there about getting in front of Croke Park with a smart business plan, does he have a point there where a lot of county boards actually, if you were to throw money at them, are a lot of county boards in a position to use that money in the right way?
Well, I was invited onto a committee some years ago by Pádraig Duffy. He brought together representatives of 8 or 9 of the weaker counties with a view to coming up with proposals to support us in promoting football, as they had done with the hurling. we met 3 or 4 times, and a lot of reasonable proposals put together, but nothing happened. That was the end of it. Nothing happened.
There was no final meeting where they were implementing the proposals?
There was no funding provided. Nothing has happened. That was 4 or 5 years ago.
I think this conversation as regards Dublin, it's too soon for me anyway. There's other counties such as Kerry and others have done 4 in a row. There's Kilkenny and Hurling have done 4 in a row. They're going for 5 in a row. I think, as you said, if they're getting to 6 and 7 in a row, then you need to be. We're going into uncharted.
Only 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I know that. We're going into uncharted territory now.
Cards as well.
If they actually manage it this year, I'll put it this way: if they get beaten this year, will the same amount of interest be in talking about Dublin and what they're doing?
Well, surely it should be, because they're probably going to win it next year if they don't win it this year.
Yeah, I think they may go, and that may be the case. And if in another 3 years' time we're looking at them with 7 and 8 All-Irelands in a row, then you're gone into uncharted territory, and you're going to have to look at whether they like it or not.
Because the way the cycle goes, that if you are investing, it's probably going to take 10-15 years to see the proof of that.
But whether they have the success or not, they're getting the funding, and the disparity is just too big at the moment. You know, when it was decided that Dublin should be funded back in 2002, it was the right decision. And in fairness, the Dublin County Board have used the money really, really well, and they have developed their clubs, and they have developed a coaching structure in Dublin that are second to none. And then John Costa probably have the best administrator in the country. But its success has, it has been achieved. What about the other, areas in the country that have black spots? The other cities would have it. We have issues in rural Ireland with the population and trying to field teams and all sorts of things, that need to be addressed by the GEA as well.
And I guess there is practical help, because when they talk about putting together smart business plans, you look at the biggest clubs around Dublin. I just mentioned, if you go from sort of the sea to the M50, from Coola to Kilmacud to Ballyboden to St Jude's, the sheer population number there, and the amount of people involved in the club, and the amount of solicitors and architects and very professional people, they've any amount of them who can all come together and apply for grants, and they have the know-how and intelligence and know-how. Whereas actually, as you say, because of the rural depopulation, the sheer numbers there mean you're at a huge disadvantage, and that's actually something the GEA can help. But again, money.
Let's give a bit of credit to the chasers. There's other teams out there besides Dublin. There's Donegal, there's Galway, there's Kerry, there's Cork, there's Armagh, there's a few chasers there. When I can always.
Dublin beat Armagh by 15 points.
We'll see. But when Kilkenny were going for the 5 in a row, nobody thought they could come near them except Liam Sheedy. And he put belief into a team. I think I'm inclined to agree with Liam a small bit here. Let's wait and see what happens. I know you, Nathan, you're saying that it's too late, but look, it's not done yet. It's not a done deal, and I think if there's a redistribution of funds, it would go a long way towards it. And there's a lot of country people in those Dublin clubs, let me tell you, from Mayo and Galway and Kerry and Donegal.
I think a redistribution of funds could happen now. I think that you're probably right. That should be happening now. Almost straight away.
Well, Tom Ryan said in the RTE piece that was aired last week that they're looking at that, and he doesn't think it will continue at the sort of rate that it's been at for the last 10 years.
But Nathan, it's like throwing apples into an orchard. The orchard is already full. What are you doing? You mean there's clubs down in Kerry who are trying to bring fellas down from Cork and Dublin to play games for them, and they don't have the funding for it.
Just on that, Wayne, then what John touched on there, that clubs around Dublin are full of country people, basically. But is that not part of the problem here, that as to how you overturn this? The demographics of the country are that more and more of the population are moving to Dublin and staying in Dublin. It's not like 30 years ago where you might go to college in Dublin and then move back home to the country. People are staying here, and that's only going to continue to increase.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to change the demographic of the country and the natural flow towards the big city. But I think in terms of the redistribution of the funding, I think we all our own counties have to look at ourselves and think, look, if we get an increased budget over the next couple of years, are we going to spend it in the proper way? And that's a big thing that we can do ourselves, regardless of what Dublin do with it, or regardless of the template that they've used. We have to make sure that we use it well in terms of, is it for developing facilities, is it for developing coaches?
But you have to make the choice is the problem, I guess, because I think most people would say if money is going in, it should go to underage development and building up like they did in Tipperary under 14 and under 15. But right now, Dublin have a backroom team of 23 people.
Well, that's it.
That's not winning the game for them. The big thing I see it, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, Nathan, is that I know of clubs that in Dublin that are looking to get the best players out of Roscommon, out of Galway, out of Kerry, out of Cork, and they want them in Dublin. When? Because what? They can afford to put them up in an apartment. They can afford to give them expenses for this, that, and the other, and nobody can match that.
But there's very few players, even still. When you look at
this is in club football.
But when you look at the amount of young men who are working in Dublin, there's still very few of the county players playing their club football in Dublin. Like, most of them are still making that sacrifice to travel down and play.
Absolutely, it's probably less now than it was 10 years ago. There were quite a lot of players attached to Dublin clubs there for a while. It seems to have calmed down a bit now, but the reality is, look, funding for us is so difficult. I mean, I'd say we've no GPS systems in Carlow. We did training weekend.
Carlow 1 games manager, 3 games development administrators.
They're doing very well. We've actually a very good coaching underage structure going on there at the moment. But in terms of looking after the county team, we just don't have the money, the resources to look after our team as well as other counties. We wanted to train a weekend, we couldn't afford it. We went to St Sylvester's for the day. The hurlers went to Tramore. They're the realities of it. We're not going to France to look at World War I graves, and it's a different level. It's an absolutely different level, and we'll always struggle. And that's the fear too with a tier championship. If you're playing an extended season through a tier 2 competition nobody wants, you've extended your cost base as well, and it puts more pressure on the county boards. So I don't know if it's going to be attractive financially for county boards. I don't know, I'm just looking here at Wicklow. 1 games manager, 6 games development administrators, 1 coaching officer, 1 hurling officer, 1 children's officer. Questions about the senior manager with that sort of resources?
Yeah, well, the senior manager has 3 of a background, and 2 of those selectors are coaches as well.
As well, yeah.
Leighton Glynn is the coach with it, Brian Heaslip, and we have 1 S&C. That's it. And let me tell you that we did an under 20 team where we had the 1 masseur and physio and the whole lot. He did the whole lot in 1, Shane Farrer, and did a good job. So you deal with the cloth you're dealt with, or you make the suit with the cloth you're dealt with, and we'd love to be in Dublin, but we're not.
Yeah, you've all been very good with your time. I'll just run through a couple of texts to finish up. Adrian O'Sullivan, who's at Coach Sully on Twitter, coach with the Westmeath Senior Hurlers, says, I don't agree with John and Turlough. Look at Nevena in Wexford last year, were junior a few years back. Not being in the top tier is not a barrier to achievement. It means winning the lower grades are targets on the road to success.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Declan Cusack, is club just different to county, you think? Because obviously every county will have their junior, intermediate, senior.
I think it is different. I think every football county aspires to play at the highest level.
If funding was the answer, how come Dublin don't have the same underage success?
They're pretty good now. They're pretty good, and they get good people over them. And the development train really only starts when they leave minor and they go and they bridge the gap, and they can bring them in, and they're in basically, if they're in good enough, they're in the system, and they're bridged all the way from 18 all the way up into the senior team. So that's an element of funding that we wouldn't have, for instance, to bridge the gap from our very good minors into our senior team, because we lose them, and we possibly might lose them to different sports even. So when Dublin get hold of the good players, they can afford to keep them.
And I don't know, is there a tie-in really between minor, it never was in Kerry anyway, between minor and senior? It's such a big gap now.
It's even bigger now.
Yeah.
And if you talk about population, Kildare and Cork are 2 counties that are hugely growing in population-wise, so they're 2 counties that certainly, from a population point of view, should be able to compete. And in any county, you can only put out 30 players, 35 players, that's the bottom line. All right, you have a better chance if the population is bigger of having those quality players, but in my view, any county could, we've mentioned Roscommon, Monaghan and others who are overachieving for the size of their county, but they're making the most of their resources and they're helping themselves.
Not looking after the clubs is most evident in a county like Cork, where their county team's suffering terribly because they've no meaningful club football games outside of Championship. A team could be out of the Championship and done for the year in July, when everyone should be playing football. A better club scene develops better county teams and improves the whole inter-county scenario. They're trying to fix the problem in reverse by starting with overhauling the inter-county fixtures. Is a text from Paul in Cork.
100%.
Good point.
This is utter madness. Let's go back to the quality and fitness of the 80s. What competition in the world has 32 teams at an even level?
It's true.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, accept that.
There's very few competitions that has, one that's so far away above the other 31.